Welcome in, everybody. We're just going to give this a minute or two for folks to join in. But while you're joining, if you wouldn't mind throwing in the chat your name and where you're calling in from, just to get the conversation started. And then we'll get rolling on the presentation in just a minute. Let me also get the Mary Louise Wood from Powell, Wyoming. Welcome, Mary Louise.
Joanne, good to see some familiar faces.
Yeah, great.
Winnipeg, Manitoba, great. Welcome, Janine. Wyoming, lots of out west folks. Jamie Pinger, awesome. Hey, Jamie, welcome.
Supreme, a recently trained facilitator. Welcome, Supreme.
Yeah. Welcome, Supreme. Glad to see you back here. Yonkers, New York. New York is in the house. Valerie, Kauai Community College, awesome. We'll provide like training discounts for on-site training in Kauai. just saying, Valerie.
Just saying, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, and Gary, I see you sent a message, but that's going only to me. So make sure to change that to everyone.
Joanne is saying, welcome back to South Africa. We need to come back to South Africa. That's awesome.
We hope.
Yeah, we'll be back, Joanne. We'll be back. Trust me.
Definitely. All right, everyone. I'll get rolling with my kind of housekeeping stuff as a few more folks roll in. Welcome to today's webinar. We're here to talk about cultivating entrepreneurial mindsets in communities and organizations, classrooms, wherever you are. My name is Nick Houle. I'm the Director of Client Engagement here at the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative, and I'll be running point as kind of like the MC chat moderator today. So we'll have a few pauses for questions, Q&A.
Bouncer too.
Bouncer too, yeah. If anyone's too rude, you'll get bounced. No, kidding. But I'll be monitoring the chat for any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, helping Gary out with technical things. We're going to run a poll here in just a second to learn a little bit more about the audience so we can tailor make this to you as we go. As I mentioned with the Q&A, feel free to drop any questions you have at any time. Gary's going to pause in the middle of the presentation and then again at the end for Q&A both times. So feel free to drop those in as we go, so I have things to read out to the audience, though. As you probably heard when you're joining, we are recording this, and I believe I have the captions going for everyone, so no worries there. We'll be sending that out along with Gary's slides within 24 hours of the presentation, so sit back, relax, and take it all in. I believe I've covered all of the basics there. So let me just run this initial poll so that we can get a little bit more information. You should see 4 questions popping up, and those are probably going to be in one panel, so you'll have to scroll. So go ahead and look at that pop up as it goes. We'll give folks about a minute to respond to that. Okay, here come the responses now. Great. Thanks, everybody. Just a reminder, there are 4 questions, and you'll have to scroll to see those in the pop-up. Dr. Michu Saint-Hubert, Michu Saint-Hubert. Thank you for the phonetic spelling, Michu.
Yeah,
from St. Philip's Community College. That's great. Oh, yeah. Good little cohort we've got going here. That's great. Okay, we're at 15 of 19 folks responding. I'll give folks another 10 seconds and then we'll close the poll and I'll let everybody know. And whoever just joined us, welcome in. We're just running a quick poll to learn more about our audience, but if you wouldn't mind tossing your name and where you're calling in from in the chat just to get the conversation started, that'd be great. We want to make this as interactive as possible and hear from folks and make sure that we're really providing some value for everyone. So feel free to drop everything in that you want. Julie from Tucson, Arizona. Welcome, Julie. Welcome. All right, I'm going to end this poll. All right, so the first question was, what type of organization do you work for? Pretty good mix of, we've got one person from K-12, 6 people from higher education, 6 people from nonprofits, 3 small business owner or leaders, as well as business or entrepreneurship ecosystem support folks. There's 3 folks from that and a few folks who just selected other. Great. About a 50-50 split. We've got 9 people saying yes, they currently are teaching entrepreneurship and 8 people not. I'm excited to hear questions from both sides of the aisle there because we want to make this clear that entrepreneurship is not just for people who are teaching in a business school. So there's applicability outside of those who are teaching in traditional entrepreneurship means. What are you most interested in? Learning about entrepreneurship, professional development, entrepreneurship programs, or both? We had 15 of 17 say both, 1 person say programs, and 1 person say professional development. So that's good, helpful, thank you. And a question about how did you hear about us? 4 folks said friends or colleagues, 3 people said email promotion, 2 people said social media, and 8 people said other. So thank you so much, everybody. That's really helpful for us to make sure this is going to be successful. All right. And TT from Lagos, Nigeria, welcome. All right. And Alan from Pembroke in North Carolina.
Yep. And TD, I'd like to know how you heard about us. We just got back from training a bunch of teachers in Johannesburg in South Africa. I'd love to know how you learned about us. It's fascinating. I just think there's this really these ideas are really resonating, I think, for, at least in the folks in South Africa.
Definitely. All right. Well, I will. Oh, from email promotion. Okay, great. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and mute myself, turn my camera off, and I will pop back up when it's time for questions. Like I mentioned, feel free to drop those questions in the chat or the Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom screen whenever you see fit. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Nick. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Host disabled screen sharing. Nick, I need a little help here. Okay, there we go. Thank you. All righty. Here we go. Can you see the screen okay, Nick?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Thank you. And I'd like to make this as interactive as possible. So please, I'll pause a couple times, throw your questions in the chat, and I'll make sure we have plenty of time to talk about that. As Nick said, this is about cultivating entrepreneurial mindsets in a classroom, organization, or community. My name's Gary Schoeniger. I'm the founder and CEO of the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative. So the basic idea here is the world has changed in ways that now require all of us to be more innovative and entrepreneurial, regardless of our chosen path. So a big part of our work is sort of broadening our understanding of entrepreneurship beyond the startup realm. And now, having said that, our work is definitely making an impact there, but we're trying to broaden the conversation to help folks recognize that entrepreneurial skills are the skills the world now demands. That's the basic idea. I also want to put this idea out there, and Ronald Heifetz is a scholar at the Harvard School of Public Policy or Leadership. I forgot the exact name of it. But he said the single biggest failure of leadership is to treat adaptive challenges like technical problems. And I threw that slide in here to remind us to set the stage, so to speak, that we think of the entrepreneurial mindset as the other side of the coin, which is the managerial mindset. And what we're saying is that in today's rapidly changing world, we need both. And that the key to survival is to understand which situation you are in so you know which mindset to apply. And what Heifetz and many other scholars are saying is that we struggle to adapt in the face of challenges because we're tending to draw from the past in order to navigate the future. So just wanted to throw that out there. When we think of entrepreneurial people, I call them sometimes entrepreneurials, we see people who are highly resilient and resourceful. These are people who are able to identify and solve problems, mobilize resources, and make things happen, regardless of the circumstances that they're in. And when you look at the attitudes and skills and the capabilities of the entrepreneur, not only do they have the attitudes and skills that enable them to adapt and thrive amidst complexity and change, they have the attitudes and skills that empower them to make a greater contribution to the organizations and the communities they inhabit. And as a result, there's unlimited global demand for people who can think like entrepreneurs. The point being that an entrepreneurial mindset enables the individual to stand out in the crowd. So the big questions here: what exactly is an entrepreneurial mindset? Why is it important? How can we develop it in ourselves and others? And so I'm going to try to hit some of these very quickly. We have this entrepreneurial mindset facilitator training that's a much deeper dive into these subjects. I want this webinar to be informative so you can walk away with some ideas and some tools. In a perfect world, you consider attending our entrepreneurial mindset facilitator training. More than 3,500 educators, organizational leaders from around the world have completed this training. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. So, I've been trying to figure out for more than 20 years what makes entrepreneurs tick. What are the underlying beliefs and assumptions that drive the behavior? As important as entrepreneurship is to individuals, to organizations, to our economies, it's not very well understood. And our research has really been focusing on not only how do entrepreneurs recognize opportunities the rest of us overlook, how do they mobilize resources and make things happen in spite of their circumstances, but what are the underlying beliefs and attitudes that drive the behavior? That's really where our work is focused. In 2010, I co-authored this book with Clifton Talbert that came from some research that I was doing for Cisco, where I interviewed about 200 what I'll call everyday entrepreneurs. And part of what's unique about our work is really counterintuitive, but it really is a game changer in terms of how we think about learning and work. And my interest in entrepreneurship has really been focused on the everyday, unlikely entrepreneur, the people who start with little or nothing, people who don't necessarily have access to resources that might not be, tech stars or academic scholars, or have access to venture capital and so forth. And that's it's so counterintuitive, but it really became one of the most unique and outstanding features of our work. It's the focus on everyday entrepreneurs. And the subtitle of this book, The 8 Life Lessons from an Unlikely Entrepreneur, are really 8 core concepts that we distilled from hundreds of interviews of typical entrepreneurs that these 8 core concepts are like the common and controllable factors that we distilled from hundreds of interviews. And you can buy that book wherever. You can buy it on Amazon. We have it in hardcover, softcover, Kindle, Audible, whatever, wherever you buy, books, you can find it. So I want to stop and ask, and Nick, if you can monitor the comments, people ask me often, like, Gary, what exactly is an entrepreneurial mindset? And if I don't have a lot of time to really unpack that important question, sometimes it's best to flip the question back to the questioner and ask, what is a non-entrepreneurial mindset? So I would love to hear your thoughts on that. I'm gonna I see the chat in there, Nick, and if something comes up, please interrupt me. But I would love to hear your thoughts. I mean, sometimes thinking about a non-entrepreneurial mindset is really helpful to sort of excavate our own deeply held assumptions about how we think about learning and work. So it's a rhetorical question. It's not really rhetorical. I would love to hear your comments here on this, and Nick will stop me.
Oh, here comes some folks saying stuff now.
Good.
Janine says, not looking for or pursuing opportunities. Joanne says, someone who doesn't show adaptability and resilience. Debbie says, staying with the status quo. James says, inability to think out of the box, quote unquote. And Jeanette says, someone who does things because it's always the way it's been done.
Yeah, that last one. Wow, that's really good. That's really good. And this is an important question, and I think I'm going to jump right to the punchline, and then I'll backfill here.
Sure.
But I think one of the fundamental things that distinguishes the entrepreneurial mindset from the non-entrepreneurial mindset has to do with what a psychologist would call locus of control. To be more specific, I think the non-entrepreneurial mindset operates on an unconscious assumption that someone else will tell me what to learn and do in order to be successful. Whereas the entrepreneurial mindset assumes it's up to me to figure out how to create value, how to make myself useful in the world. And again, this assumption is operating mostly at an unconscious level. And so I think this is a good starting off point. We can dig a little deeper into that. So what I want to introduce in this webinar today is 2 important ideas. I want to start by defining the mindset as a hidden mechanism that influences our behavior without our awareness. The second idea is I want to redefine entrepreneurship for the 21st century. The current definitions are antiquated, they're misleading, they're business oriented, and it's taken me a long time to figure this out, but I'm going to offer a new definition of entrepreneurship that is much more broadly embraced as it can be. So let me start with the mindset component here. I love this famous Kenyon College commencement address from David Foster Wallace, in which he begins with this parable of the 2 young fish swimming along, and they pass an older fish. And the old fish says to the younger fish, "Good morning, fellas, how's the water?" And the 2 young fish keep swimming along until one looks at the other one and says, "What the hell is water?" And I think that's really that's a good way to think about mindset. And as Wallace goes on to say, it's sometimes the most obvious important realities are the ones that are the hardest to see. What I'm saying is that the entrepreneurial mindset only seems mysterious or enigmatic to us to the extent that we are steeped in a managerial paradigm. That's another way of saying what Wallace is saying. So we all have a mindset, yet very few of us are aware of it, much less the ways in which it influences our behavior without our awareness, right? So Carl Jung had another way of saying this. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. A big part of our work is to help people optimize their mindset. And I'll say more about that in a minute. Now, I've looked at the literature and I really couldn't find anything meaningful that I could really hang my hat on in terms of a clinical definition of mindset, until I began to study culture. And I realized that mindset is to an individual what culture is to a group. And Edgar Schein is kind of my go-to guy there. He's a professor emeritus at MIT. And so I took his definition of culture and I tweaked it to bring it down to an individual level. So my definition of mindset is a pattern of values, beliefs, and assumptions learned by an individual that has worked well enough to be considered valid and therefore assumed to be the correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to our problems or in the pursuit of our goals. I realize that it's a little bit clunky, but it's very, very precise, and I'll expand on that now. But we also see that, mindset shapes culture and culture shapes our mindset. So there's an interactive dynamic here, right? That you can't point to mindset as the cause of culture or the culture as the cause of mindset. There's a bi-directional relationship there. But there are two important functions of a mindset that I want to bring to your attention. I'll tell you what the purpose of a mindset is in a second, but these two functions are where we're concerned. Number one is our mindset determines the output we get from whatever inherent capabilities we have. And Warren Buffett said it like this. You got a guy over here with a 400 horsepower engine, but his mindset is such that he only knows how to get 100 horsepower out of the engine. And we all know folks like that. But then you got a guy over here with a 200 horsepower engine, and yet he knows how to get all 200 horsepower out of his engine. That guy's better off than the guy with the 400 horsepower engine. That's what we see in these typical entrepreneurs. They're not necessarily the brightest scholars or have the highest IQs or the highest grade point averages, but they know how to get all of the abilities out of the capability they have. But the second aspect of a mindset that I want to draw your attention to is our mindset becomes a mindset. It becomes a fixed way of thinking that draws from the past in order to navigate the future. And it tends to interfere. It tends to hinder our ability to adapt in the face of change. So those are the two aspects of a mindset that we're concerned with. The mindset model, and again, this is adapted from Edgar Schein, works like this. On the surface, you have the visible artifacts, the observable behavior. These are the outcomes. On level 2, we find our explicit knowledge and espoused values. This is what we know, and what we say that we value. But what anthropologists would tell you is level 2 is very often our after the fact justification. When we look for the underlying causes of our level 1 outcomes, we find them to be unconscious, deeply held values, taken for granted beliefs and assumptions of which we're not really aware. The point is that a mindset is a belief system that is perfectly designed to create the outcomes that it creates. So a big part of our work is helping people understand that they, number one, they do have a mindset, but let's do some archaeology here. Let's excavate our level 3 assumptions and bring them up into the level 2 so that we can examine them and decide, are these the optimal beliefs and assumptions for our current situation? And then also compare our beliefs and assumptions and values to those of an entrepreneur. The dimensions, like, so some of these underlying level 3 beliefs and assumptions are things like our perceived locus of control. People have an external locus of control, believe that fate, luck, circumstances, powerful others control their destiny. Whereas people with an internal locus of control feel as if they're responsible for the outcomes in their lives. Again, we don't walk around saying, hi, my name's Gary. I have an external locus of control or an internal locus of control. Having said that, you can very quickly determine that by observing a person's behavior or listening to what they say and talk about, right? We all know people that the chronic complainers, right? I want to do cool stuff, but the world won't let me. This person is saying that level 2, probably not aware of their level 3 assumptions of powerlessness. Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Most of us don't understand these differences. They have an enormous impact on our ability to persist. Fixed growth orientation. Is my talent and ability finite, or can I develop it through deliberate practice? Again, unconscious assumptions that have an enormous impact on the type of goals we set for ourselves. Optimistic versus pessimistic explanatory style, huge impact on our ability to persist and develop resilience. And I think the holy grail here is overall just self-efficacy. And the way Albert Bandura described it is people who have high self-efficacy set high goals for themselves. They tend to stick to their goals in the face of adversity. They just don't give up in the face of challenge and setbacks. And what Bandura pointed out is that people with high self-efficacy, you know, they enjoy greater degrees of psychological well-being. They just overall life experiences are more positive, where people with low perceived self-efficacy tend to set lower goals for themselves. They tend to give up easily in the face of challenge. They also have a much higher propensity for depression and anxiety and other challenges like that. So that's a quick overview of a mindset. The basic idea here is our mindset tends to become a fixed way of thinking that we perceive to be the correct way to perceive, think, and feel. And yet very often it's some of these assumptions are suboptimal. Next, I want to redefine entrepreneurship in a way that everyone can embrace. And as I said earlier, the current definitions, if you look up the definition of entrepreneurship, it's going to be one of a few definitions. Number one, it's going to be somebody who takes a risk in exchange for a profit. Our research does not support that at all. More importantly, what bothers me about that, it just assumes that profit is the motive. And when in our research, what we see again and again and again is there's a purpose-driven component, which becomes the rocket fuel of motivation, the intrinsic motivation. You're going to see definitions that say someone who organizes and operates a business. That's a 200-year-old definition that is also very limiting. There was one from Howard Stevenson at Harvard. I forgot what it, somebody who pursues opportunity without regard for resources currently controlled. It doesn't really tell me much at all. When we hear the word entrepreneur, for a lot of us, that conjures the image of the high growth entrepreneur, the venture-backed high growth billionaire class. That's all fine. I don't need to denigrate that, but that, a lot of colleges and universities are trying to emulate that venture-backed high growth model, which I think is really a narrow definition of entrepreneurship. When we look at the data, what we see is that a tiny fraction of all new ventures created in the United States, that's about 600,000, give or take, every year, only a small fraction of a single percent are created with venture capital. So it really, this venture-backed model is narrow. For the vast majority of students, it's either irrelevant or it's completely out of reach. My beef is that it skews our thinking about how to be entrepreneurial and who can be entrepreneurial. Some people hear the word entrepreneur and they think of a small business owner. And that just goes to say, a couple of things I want to say about that. Very often the venture-backed high growth types tend to, turn their nose up at the small business owner, when in fact, small businesses are the backbone of our economy. And the vast majority of all new jobs are created by firms that are 5 years old or less, with 9 employees or less. The problem we see in the small business realm is the tendency to conflate managerial attitudes and skills with entrepreneurial attitudes and skills. And what our research has done is really disentangled those two. And what we've learned is that the attitudes and skills required to discover an opportunity are almost entirely distinct from the attitudes and skills required to exploit that opportunity. The latter being managerial, the former being entrepreneurial. So the basis, a lot of the research of our research kind of boils down to this basic theory here that I adapted from a guy named Dr. George Land. It's called transformation theory, and it's designed to explain the nature of change within any living system, an individual, an organism, an organization, whatever, a society, a community, what have you. And so here's how it works. What Land is saying, there are 3 phases of change that are inescapable. There's a discovery phase, there's a growth or a replication phase, and then there's an obsolescence phase. What Land is saying is that each of these 3 phases require distinct rules for survival. And the rules for survival and discovery don't apply to growth, and the rules for growth don't apply in obsolescence, and vice versa. They're not interchangeable. In some cases, the obsolescence phase becomes a reinvention phase, and that's happening more and more frequently. 50 years ago or 100 years ago, you went through one S-curve in your lifetime. And now, the average person is likely to go through a dozen S-curves, and the reinvention is a constant thing. These orange dots are what Land refers to as breakpoints, and they're visual representations of the moment in time when the rules for survival change. It's important to point out that in real life, there are rarely orange dots. Right? It's not that cut and dry. This is just for simplicity's sake. So the discovery phase is exploration. That's where the organism is searching for a connection with its environment. And that begs the question, as humans, how do we connect with our environment? Well, we connect with our environment by making ourselves useful to other humans, right? And so most of us, this exploration phase occurs in a formal learning environment. And the first break point is represented by you graduate from high school or college or whatever it is. And the learning phase, the exploration is over. Now you go out into the world and apply what you've learned, right? The organism makes a connection. Now it stops searching, stops the discovery phase, and goes out into the world and begins to replicate the useful thing that it discovered in phase one. Then ultimately, the second break point is reached when the growth begins to slow. Now, that slowed growth might be a sign that you're getting near retirement, you're aging out of the system. The slowed growth might mean that your skills are becoming increasingly obsolete, right? Shift happens, as I like to say. There's all manner of reasons why the growth slows. They could be internally imposed, externally imposed, but shift happens. Let's just leave it there. But it's that second phase is where we struggle to adapt. And one of the points that Land made is that, nothing fails like success. And this is the real genius of Land's, this theory. The attitudes and skills that were absolutely essential for success in column 2 will now prevent us from adapting in the face of change. That's the big idea there. So that's just a very brief overview. In our training, we'll do a much deeper dive in the 3 phases, the attitudes and skills required to adapt and thrive in each. But the idea here is simple, that entrepreneurship is the self-directed pursuit of opportunity to create value for others. And by creating value for others, we empower ourselves. And I like this definition because anyone can embrace this. You can take a minimum wage job in a fast food restaurant and embrace this idea that it's up to me to figure out how to maximize my utility in this situation. Not only will you become optimally engaged, but you'll empower yourself by tapping into the most potent form of human motivation there is. So, Nick, I'm going to pause and ask, just stop for a minute and see what questions we have, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, great. So no one's chimed in yet, but there were a few more folks who responded to the question of what is a non-entrepreneurial mindset. So I'll read those out first while we wait to see if anyone has questions for you. Where did we leave off? Not finding solutions, says Valerie. We had another person contributing the thought of not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to leave the status quo, not being open-minded, inability to be a self-starter. Kind of the thought of this is the way it's always been done, so we stay with it. And I think that's really reiterated by what you were just talking about with that phase 3.
Yeah. And what I didn't say earlier, Nick, is the way our mindset works is our brains are always seeking to automate everything in order to reduce the cognitive load. That's the purpose of a mindset. Once we learn something, it comes in at level 2, we learn it, we assume it's the correct way, and then it drops to level 3. This is called automaticity. Our brains need to automate everything in order to reduce the cognitive load. Once it's at level 3, we're not aware of it, and we can't see how it's contributing to the outcomes. Yep. That's the problem. So from an evolutionary, there's an evolutionary benefit to mindset. It gets you, like when you're in column 2, you get better and better and more efficient, and things come quicker and easier to you as you develop expertise. So when the future looks like the past, your mindset is a feature. It's an evolutionary feature. But in times of adaptive challenge, your mindset becomes a bug. And that's what's happening. Our ability to adapt has not kept pace with the rate of change.
Right.
That's where the mindset is really important.
So Janet is asking, what are some practical applications for adopting an entrepreneurial mindset?
Well, that's a big question. That's a really big question. So, but I'm going to answer it. I'm going to come at that question, Jeanette, from a different perspective. Look, if you're happy with your work and you're well paid and what you're doing is working, keep doing that. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't break it if it's not broken. But the thing is, it's if there's something inside you that's telling you there's more for you out there, that you have more to contribute, that something isn't working, that's when you're going to need an entrepreneurial mindset. So, I mean, like I said, it's a really, really big question. I could take, a couple hours to unpack that.
Yeah. One thing I'll just reiterate where you started the conversation, Gary, which is the nearly unlimited global demand for people who can think this way. It's not always to say that everyone needs to start a business or needs to be the leader of an organization, but taking that finding opportunities through solving problems for others perspective just enables us to be much more, a term that we often use in our work, future proof.
Yeah.
Philip asks a more specific question about the relevance of locus of control in determining if someone becomes obsolescent or if they go into reinvention. I chimed in and said, I think that that's a big part of it, but it's also important to note that we can shift our loci of control. So if you have an external locus of control and you're starting to feel that you're becoming obsolete, that may be a sign to start doing things to shift your locus of control so you can become relevant again.
Yeah, I like that. And what we hear from people who've gone through our programs is like, that's the big aha.
Mm-hmm.
That like, you don't realize, but like, wow, I'm focusing all of my time and attention on things I have no control over. And at the same time, I'm ignoring the things that I do.
Right.
But the question really, Nick, gets at the essence of what this work is all about. Mm-hmm. Starting a business is one way to manifest your mindset, your entrepreneurial mindset, but it's not the only way. Look, here's the point. The desire to fulfill human needs through our own effort, to live autonomously, to contribute, is an essential part of our species' essence. That's not just in some of us, it's in all of us. And part of what I'm saying here is that, while the Industrial Revolution and the division of labor lifted humanity out of, abject poverty, that's kind of come to an end of its usefulness. And we used to think that, entrepreneurs were these wild spirits that invented things and everybody else was destined to work in these controlled environments. And the rate of change is thus that, the things are constantly changing. And if you look at the attitudes and skills the world demands, they're entrepreneurial skills. They don't always call them that, but that's what they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm looking at time and I want to make sure that we can get to the other points. So Pamela, we'll pick up with your question at the end of the presentation, if that's all right. Thank you for chiming in.
Yeah, I just want to tick very quickly now. Thank you, Nick. Through our Ice House program that was inspired. This is a curriculum we developed. It was inspired by the book that I co-authored with Clifton Talbert. It was developed with some initial funding from the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City, which is the largest foundation for entrepreneurship in the United States. I would also just like to say we're doing some amazing work with the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation and Alan and Jill Gray Philanthropy South Africa partners also. So in any case, that's the background. Here's how it works. Very simple. And you can use this methodology, whether you use the Ice House, our curriculum materials or not. This is our methodology. It's really, really straightforward, right? So this is, you know, what I just gave you was some sort of philosophical background in understanding the entrepreneurial mindset, how entrepreneurs actually do what they do is what this is about, and then how to diffuse this in others. Start by redefining entrepreneurship in a way that everyone can embrace. Introduce these 8 core entrepreneurial competencies that I distilled from hundreds of interviews. Immerse the learner in the opportunity discovery process. Expose them to relatable social models. Encourage personal reflection. We want the learner to think about their own thinking constantly. And embrace facilitation. You can't teach this stuff with the same thinking that we teach traditional learning. You got to rely on facilitation rather than traditional, like top-down expert model of teaching. And we've developed what we call a 4-stage framework to shift from a hierarchical top-down to a horizontal mentor coaching facilitating model. So one by one, redefine entrepreneurship. I've already kind of hit that. This is a definition anyone can embrace. Introduce these 8 core competencies. I won't get into them here. Do yourself a favor and buy a copy of the book. These are these 8 fundamental concepts that kept coming up again and again and again across hundreds of interviews. In South Africa, 2 weeks ago, I interviewed a dozen local entrepreneurs. All these same things come up. The context is different, the culture is different, but these same core ideas keep coming to the surface. Immerse the learner in the process. We have what we call the opportunity discovery canvas that breaks this into 3 basic phases. There's a problem finding phase, which is mostly ignored in the small business development. And that's the problem, is that people show up with a solution and we got to push them back upstream to start asking questions. What problem are you actually solving? So, you know, if you prescribe without diagnosing, you're setting yourself up for failure. In any case, this canvas, we took the Osterwalder's business model canvas, simplified it, took all of the business vernacular out of there and just made it really simple. What problems are you trying to solve? Who has the problem? How are they solving it? You know, I'm not talking about customers and markets and segments. I'm talking about human beings who have unmet needs. So we encourage the learner to go through this iterative experimental process, essentially following the scientific method. And that's kind of how that works. Oh, dear me. Sorry about that. Then expose the learner to relatable social models. This is another part of our secret sauce. You know, unless you're at Stanford, stop talking about Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. You want to get people to embrace this behavior, expose them to people who have come from similar or worse circumstances. So in the Ice House program, we have about a dozen different case studies, let's say, that enable the learner to hear the firsthand experience of people who have come from all manner of challenging backgrounds. Oh, dear God, Nick, I forgot to take the bills out of here. I'm so sorry. Encourage personal reflection. That's a super important point I want to make. From the beginning, what we ask the learner in the very beginning of the course is, what's the future you want to create for yourself? What's your best possible future look like? Don't think about the how. Don't think about your strategy, what you'll need, how hard it's going to be. Just let yourself think about it. We ask students to think about, how are you going to contribute? What skills and interests and abilities do you have? So how are you going to contribute? How you got to get what you want, you got to give, right? And then the third set of questions are around, what's holding you back? What are the external barriers? Like, get specific. It's not just a boogeyman. Like, get specific. What are the external barriers? And probably more importantly, what are the internal barriers? How are we holding ourselves back? These are the reflection questions that we start in the beginning and continue to work on. And that's really to get the learner to think about their own thinking. Last one, sorry. And then embrace facilitation. And here we use Albert Bandura's guided mastery. Small wins, you just build on small wins, right? You introduce relatable social models, invite local entrepreneurs that your students can relate to into the learning experience. Encourage the learner to find their own mentors, guides, and facilitators, right? We can be that in the beginning, but we want the student to find their own. It's not like they're doing this all on their own, but we want them to learn how to find their own teachers, what Vygotsky called more capable peers. And lastly, we provide some tools to be able to self-regulate, how not to, self-destruct when things go wrong, how to optimistically interpret adversity. Very briefly, how it works. So thus far, we've trained about 3,500 facilitators around the world. We've got this map on our website. You can contact the dots represent individuals, and we haven't updated this in a minute, but we just got back from training 200 teachers in South Africa. A few things what people are saying about our work, which has been presented at the Vatican, the United Nations, the European Commission, Papal Council for Peace and Justice at the Vatican, all over the world, that people are talking about Ice House. It's spreading across the globe. So a few brief comments here. Ice House training was a phenomenal experience. Even as a seasoned entrepreneur, I learned a lot and really appreciate the broad application. This material is relevant to any individual or group. What we keep hearing is people saying this is life-changing, this is transformational, right? This is from Grady Meeks from the School of Management at Daytona State. The entrepreneurial mindset is vital for continuous improvement, provides a universal value proposition that can be applied in any situation. So I want to give you guys more time. We've got about 7 minutes left. I'm happy to hang out for a few extra minutes. Our next public facilitator training is in July. We do a lot of on-site trainings for specific organizations. We do workshops, professional development, keynotes, training programs. We can adapt to your organization. That's what we do. So I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to stop my screen sharing and see what questions you all have. How do I stop sharing? There we go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, conveniently, as you were going over kind of the general concepts of Ice House, Pamela was feeling that you answered her question, but I'll still read it out just in case anyone could use more clarity on that. She asked, what can we do as business leaders and directors to help others have positive self-efficacy and therefore start to build an entrepreneurial mindset? And we touched on that a little bit with the art of facilitation, but I wondered, Gary, if you had any other thoughts there.
I do. It's a great question, and Pamela. Here's what it is. Managerial paradigms, let's say, are important for the efficient replication and distribution of useful things into the world. And we need that. Managerial paradigms are focused on replication and efficiency. It's all column 2. It's an error reducing paradigm, and we need that. But those managerial paradigms tend to be intolerant of experimentation, exploration. And so what we have to do is help leaders recognize how to create space for entrepreneurial activity and have managerial people understand the value of entrepreneurial and create this third space where the two can come out of their respective domains and interact. That's it in a quick nutshell. Pamela, if you, be happy to chat with you offline if you want to know more about that. That's a lot of the work we do at the leadership development level. We work with colleges, universities, organizations around the world to do just that.
Yeah.
To create spaces that encourage the development of entrepreneurial attitudes and skills. And Pamela, the one last thing I'll say about that is every single time what we find is there's this massive untapped entrepreneurial potential in the organization and once it's unleashed, like unbelievable things happen. We have a case study on our website from the city government of Albuquerque, where 6,000 city government workers are being empowered with an entrepreneurial mindset. And the impact that is having is just nothing short of phenomenal. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, definitely. Not a question, but a comment that I thought was worth highlighting. Joanne said, personal experience, I took a while to shift my locus of control and reinvent myself because I was so emotionally invested. I'm assuming that that's emotionally invested in the way things were being done already.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's important. A lot of people fall into that. So you're not alone there.
And so the model, you raise a good point, Nick. The model that we're advocating is very straightforward, whether you're an individual, an organization, whatever. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't quit your job. Don't drop out of school. Don't mortgage your house. But break off 5 or 10 or 15% of your discretionary time and thought and experiment with new ways to make yourself more useful to more people. That's really what the model is. It's not the screw it, let's do it model. It's what we're saying is that everyone should use some small percentage. The opportunities exist in the narrowest of margins. And that's what we see in these entrepreneurs.
Definitely. Well, I've seen a few people say they needed to jump off. So I want to, since we have a couple minutes left, if anyone has any other questions for us, no bad questions. Also wanted to highlight, Gary had that slide up. We do have a training where we will dive into this coming up in July. I'll make sure to include a link to that in the follow-up email. Speaking of the follow-up email, you should be getting that within about 24 hours of the end of this presentation, give or take an hour or two.
Yeah, hope this was helpful. Thank you guys all for joining. Hope there's something else we can do for you. You just let us know, there's a million ways to connect with us. We've got a ton of resources on our website. Would love to see you at our next facilitator training. At the very least, check out a copy of Who Owns the Ice House.
Definitely. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, Kuzan. Okay. Last chance, everyone. Great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Jamie. Good?
Oh. Yep, all good. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a good day, and we'll send the recording out soon.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick. Thanks for your help.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Gary.